And what I want to talk today about is a little bit about where this idea, the spiritual path, come from, because it really is a movement. You walked into a Unity Spiritual Center, but we're a lot like a CSL, which is right across town. We're a lot like a group called Universal Foundation for Better Living, which was Johnny Coleman's church. There's one of those right in Miami Gardens. And there's other groups that are very similar ideas, but where did these come from? Where did these ideas generate, and why is it a movement? What makes it a movement? What holds us together? So what we call New Thought spirituality draws on spiritual wisdom from a huge variety of sources. And I love to think and talk about this because, I don't know if you guys know me, I am a total New Thought nerd. Total New Thought nerd. Just like some people nerd out about science fiction or fantasy or comics, technology, that kind of thing, and I do more than my share. Let me know if you ever want a Star Trek themed sermon. I got a couple of them cooking. There we go, John wants one. But I'm just as nerdy about these ideas, the teachers, and the history of this movement. So you've got ideas of mystical Christianity. You've got Buddhist ideas. You've got ancient Greek philosophy. And you've got Hindu wisdom, all wrapped up, feeding part of our spiritual thinking into this thought we call new. There really is nothing new in New Thought. But that's not what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about how the first truly modern expression of these ideas came to be. The teachers, the wisdom, and the key ideas that started a movement, that started it. Because it really did become a movement, much bigger than any one teacher or idea. So today I'm just going to focus on 3 spiritual teachers, just 3, and 1 idea from each. And they're powerful ideas, powerful spiritual truths that you can incorporate into your own healing practice. The big idea I want to leave you with is that New Thought is and always has been a healing movement. A healing movement. People come to this teaching, this path, to be healed. And healing comes from many forms. For most of us here today, the most powerful healing that comes from New Thought teaching is a healing from the hurtful, weaponized religion of our fundamentalist friends. A lot of people have been bruised or hurt by a kind of dogmatic spirituality. That's an important kind of healing, and it's a big reason why a lot of people come. A progressive, positive, practical spiritual path, one that celebrates the sacred value of all people, one that empowers you to get in the driver's seat of your own life. Changes everything. But there's another path to healing, one that's maybe a little less emphasized today in New Thought, but many, many people have experienced real physical healing by using these spiritual tools. Spiritual healing. If you've been to a Unity Center more than a couple times in your life, I'm sure you've heard of the story of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore and their healing, how they used these tools, and then were inspired to make Unity. That's not the story I'm going to tell you today. I'm going to tell you about 3 teachers you probably haven't heard of before Charles and Myrtle. How did Charles and Myrtle learn Unity before Unity? It's fascinating, so I hope you'll enjoy the journey with me. So the truly modern expression of the movement we call New Thought began with a man called Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. Who's ever heard of P.P. Quimby? We've got about 4 of you, and it's probably because I blabbed about it in Power Hour. Okay. Quimby was a clockmaker who lived in Maine in the mid-19th century. He was a very innovative, a man who loves to tinker, a nerd, you might say. So living in the 19th century was a dirty place, no ventilation, bad sanitation, burning wood and coal to heat or cook anything. So he was diagnosed with consumption, which was kind of a catch-all for respiratory illnesses. Now for this, he was given the very best medical treatment available at the day, mercury chloride. which, rather than heal you, often just gave you mercury poisoning. Needless to say, it didn't really help. So he's desperate to be cured, looking around for different ways, anything he can do to improve his condition. And so he had a friend tell him, hey, I was having trouble breathing. I went and took a horse ride, and I felt a lot better. So he did. He took a horse ride trying to cure consumption. And you know what? He actually felt better. But Quimby was a smart guy, so he began to suspect maybe a horse ride didn't have anything to do with my healing. Anything to do with it. There must be some other factor, something about my expectations that healed me. He thought riding the horse would help, and it somehow did. Very interesting. So later, Quimby gets involved in something called mesmerism, which is the precursor to hypnosis. He worked with a partner who he would put in a trance, a hypnotic state. And this partner, he'd do clairvoyant healings. Have you ever heard of Edgar Cayce? Anyone here? Yeah. It was a bit like that, but in the mid-19th century. So what kind of treatments? Well, most of them were harmless, like drink a common herbal tea. Some of them were just absurd, though. One person, he said, eat a whole lemon and dunk your head in a rain barrel for a full minute, and that'll cure your tuberculosis. And it did. And it did. Amazingly, it worked, and people really were cured. Many, many people came to these demonstrations, these clairvoyant healings, and were healed. So Quimby, the nerd that he is, the tinkerer that he is, he gets to thinking. Obviously, eating a lemon and dunking your head in a rain barrel, that's not healing you, but something's going on here. People are being cured. What could it be? Then he had his big insight, this big idea. The people experienced healing because they believed they would be healed. They believed in the belief itself is what made them well. It's an effect that's well studied today. It's called the placebo effect, right? Placebo effect. Whenever we test a new medicine, they test its effectiveness against a sugar pill or something harmless like that. But the fact that kind of gets glossed over is that some percentage of people in these studies always experience an improvement in their condition even when they're given the sugar pill, because somebody in a lab coat gave them this medicine and told them it's a new treatment, and they thought they were going to be healed, and so they were. Because they believe they're taking a powerful new medicine, they're healed. So Quimby dug into that idea. Instead of blowing past it like some anomaly or some weird outcome we need to control for, Quimby dug deeper to try to understand why people's beliefs make them well. Quimby ditched his clairvoyant partner. He stopped doing the hypnosis, stopped the trances, stopped working with clairvoyant healing at all. No more dunking your head in a rain barrel and calling it a cure. Quimby worked directly with people's beliefs. Directly with people's beliefs, their thoughts. Quimby believed if people can get a new thought about their illness, they can be healed. Quimby was a practitioner. People came to him, and he sat with them and worked directly to change their beliefs. Here was his method. First, recognize that the cause of disease is often an error in belief. Somebody told you you should be sick, and you believe them. People always get worn out as they age. Everyone in my family had this disease, so I guess it's my turn. I must deserve to be sick because of some foolish thing I did when I was younger. Well, everyone around me getting sick, it's only a matter of time for me. And now that I have this illness, I guess this is my lot, and I'm stuck with it. All of those are error beliefs. All of those ideas, they have no basis in truth. To be healed, you must systemically challenge them. Challenge those ideas in your own beliefs about them. Change them. Second step, go to the silence. So sit in silence with the patient and be open to spiritual inspiration. This is what Quimby did. Completely receptive. Quimby was tuning into that divine flow, tuning into the patient's own beliefs. He was trying to find the specific error they were facing and relying on his own intuition. You can go in the silence too and directly tap into that spiritual wisdom. There's nothing unique about Quimby here. We're all a part of that same spiritual connection. And the third, final step, healing through explanation. So once he understood that error belief, Quimby would give a positive argument for the truth. He found that patients often had some deeply rooted fear or superstition. Maybe their religious beliefs were holding them back and were the cause. Remember, it's a very conservative time. We were one step away from Puritanism. Quimby would speak the truth about a God of wisdom, a God of love that was working right here and now, and help to shift their beliefs. So he's doing this, and thousands of people are coming to him. Thousands of people are being cured, chronic illnesses healed, the seemingly incurable cured. It really was incredible. One of the people that came to Quimby was someone you may have heard of, Mary Baker Patterson, who later became Mary Baker Eddy. So she had a series of personal tragedies. Her story is really something. At the ripe old age of 22, she was widowed from her first husband and being abandoned and later divorced by her second husband by her early 30s. So imagine a widowed woman divorced in her mid-30s in the 19th century, trying to make it on her own. She had the spinal weakness and muscle spasms, and after everything she faced, she was nearly bedridden. Incredibly weak and in poor health, she was like Quimby, desperate to find a way to cure her illness. So she found Quimby and found the means to go and visit him. And less than a week of working with Quimby for daily spiritual treatments, remember these sit with you and intuition, challenge the bad beliefs at the core, she was completely healed and could walk. So there's a story that first, from being too feeble to walk when she met Quimby, within a week she's climbed the 192 steps of the Portland, Maine City Hall unaided. That's real healing, physical healing. She believed she could be well. Quimby, the practitioner, helped her realize this, and she was healed. So she came to Quimby's inner circle and worked with this healing ministry for years. They were quite close. But the problem started again for Eddy when Quimby died in the 1860s. A few months after his passing, Eddy had a slip and a fall on the ice, winter in New England. She found herself bedridden again, unable to walk again. Back where she started before her spiritual healing, only now there's no Quimby, no practitioner to turn to heal. So what she did is she picked up her Bible at random. Have you ever done this? You just pick up a spiritual book and open it at random to see where it lands, and then you get exactly what you needed in that moment. She did this, and this is the verse she opened to in the Gospel of Matthew. But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, "Why do you think evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Arise and walk,' but that you may know the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins." Then he said to the paralytic, "Arise, take up your bed, and go to your house." And he arose and departed to his house. So knowing their thoughts, remember, your thoughts are the cause of your sickness, Jesus said, "Why are you thinking evil? Why are you thinking these thoughts? Your sins, your error thoughts are forgiven. Arise and walk." To Eddy, this verse was a breakthrough. It was the whole key to spiritual healing. It's your thoughts that make you sick. It's your thoughts that keep you sick. And that indwelling spirit, the Christ, has the authority to release them. So you can let go of these thoughts which are holding you back. All you have to do is take up your bed and walk. Eddy's great spiritual discovery is that you don't need a spiritual healer. You don't need a man like Quimby to convince you that your beliefs are holding you back. You can turn right within to your indwelling power and be healed. You can heal yourself, change your thinking, and change your life. This was a powerful idea. Started a movement. She started Christian Science, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's still around today. And if the story of Christian Science stopped right there, we might all be Christian Scientists. But it didn't. It didn't. So what happened? Well, Eddie decided that the spiritual revelation she had was unique, completely her own, and no one else could teach it except her. You had to read her book and interpret the scriptures through her spiritual key. She denied ever having been healed by Quimby and claimed to have taught him the method. I'm serious, guys. This is history. Despite him having thousands of healings and a whole healing practice before they ever met, she taught him somehow. Okay, human ego, pure and simple. Human ego. So she locked down that theology of Christian Science right where it was in 1886. They still don't ordain ministers. They just have readers who read her old sermons from 100 years ago. She's the one and only minister of Christian Science. Imagine having a minister who only reads their old rehashed sermons. Not a thriving, energetic service. Now imagine you haven't heard a sermon younger than 100 years. Not good. Here's another symptom of having their theology locked in place. You probably, if you know one thing about Christian Scientists, you probably know they don't take medicine. They don't take medicine. Why is that? Remember, they locked their thinking down in 1886. Back then, this was before the FDA. Anyone could sell you a medicine, and you had no idea what was in it. Remember, Quimby got mercury poisoning by taking the best medicine available. They'd give you cocaine and call it a cough syrup. I don't know how effective it was, but there you are. Doctors would sometimes prescribe you cigarettes. Some of those cigarettes had asbestos filters. I can breathe easier already. And this was also before germ theory. They didn't even wash their hands before surgery, because a gentleman's hands were always clean. It was always men who were doctors. Nurses washed their hands, the women washed their hands, but the men somehow didn't think they needed to do it. Needless to say, Eddie wasn't exactly wrong about avoiding medicine in the 1880s. You probably were better off avoiding it and doing the inner spiritual work exclusively. But like I said, she locked it down. It's an ideology frozen in time. And as time passed and medical science got better, it became more and more obsolete. So we're grateful to Eddie for her realization and her discovery that you have the power to heal yourself. But we're going to need to move on to our last teacher to see how this healing movement turned into new thought that we know today. Emma Curtis Hopkins. Emma Curtis Hopkins. So she first learned about Christian Science at a lecture from Mary Baker Eddy. Hopkins had chronic respiratory issues. Remember the poor sanitation, bad ventilation in those old New England houses. When she heard the lecture for spiritual healing, she tried the principle herself, and that day was healed and never had respiratory or breathing issues. Again, immediate healing as soon as she applied the principle. So she worked very closely with Eddie for years, first as one of her students, then as the first editor of the Christian Science Journal. She helped spread the news of Christian Science far and wide, until one day Eddie caught her doing something unforgivable. Unforgivable. She caught her reading other spiritual teachers and preparing an article for the journal. It was going to be all about the wisdom of spiritual teachings from around the world. Blasphemy. Remember, Eddie thought she had a complete and total revelation of spiritual truth. What business does Hopkins has studying these other spiritual teachings? And this was supposed to be a Christian science. What business do we have studying the spiritual wisdom of Hinduism or Buddhism or anything like that? So she fired her and literally locked her out of her dormitory. So this lockdown, limited expression of spirituality was never going to work for Hopkins. Hopkins was a school teacher, and she loved the classics. She knew her Shakespeare and her Plato, her Latin and her Greek, and she read far and wide, always curious, always exploring, always wanting to know more and more spiritual wisdom. So Hopkins set out on her own. She moved to Chicago, and she started her own seminary. And then she went down to single-handedly start the New Thought movement, that as we know it today. Hopkins never founded a church. She never wanted a denomination. She just wanted to teach spiritual truth. She wanted to empower people to go forth and do their own spiritual work, make it their own, keep exploring. And her teachings changed over time. Her earliest writings were a few steps away from Christian Science, but her later writings were highly mystical. They drew from wisdom from around the world, all kinds of spiritual teachings. She synthesized 12 key spiritual lessons and taught various versions of this for her whole career. And teach she did. She's known as the teacher of teachers, because every founder of a New Thought group, every early leader of New Thought learned from Hopkins. Emily Cady, who wrote Lessons in Truth, was one of her students. So did Nona Brooks, Melinda Kramer, who founded Divine Science, another New Thought group. Ernest Holmes was one of her last students, and then he went on to write The Science of Mind after he learned from Hopkins. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore studied with her. They actually studied and became ministers under Hopkins. So who made Charles Fillmore a minister? Emma Curtis Hopkins ordained him. Hopkins had an immense impact, a profound one, and she never wanted to lock the truth down, but let it grow and change and evolve organically. She sought far and wide for spiritual inspiration. She kept revising her views, and as time went on, she inspired others to go and share the spiritual truth, to go and change the world. So my friends, the journey we've been on today, as I've shared this history with you, it's a journey of our movement, of growth and evolution of these ideas over time. That's always how spirit works. It always works in terms of somebody starts it, and the next person takes the ball and moves it a little further, and expands it a little more, and they go a little further and expand it a little more. You've got to stay open at the top. You've got to be open to growth and change and evolving over time. Phineas Parker's Quimby taught us we can experience healing just as soon as we believe we can be healed. Change your thinking and change your life. Mary Baker Eddy taught us we can do the healing work ourselves. The spiritual power is right within us, and we have authority to use it now and always. And Emma Curtis Hopkins teaches us to stay open at the top. Never stop speaking for spiritual truth. Seek far and wide and empower others to go forth and be the spiritual light in the world. You have the power right here to start a healing process. Change your thinking, claim your inner power, and be open wherever spirit takes you. That's spiritual healing. You can use it to heal your body, to heal your relationships, and to heal the world. The method is the same. The healing power is the same. All we have to do is use it. And so it is.